Please come to me alone for shelter. Be not grieved, for I shall release you from all evils. Shri Krishna tells Arjun to leave all dharmas and come to him alone for shelter and come to his unique refuge. He then tells Arjun not to be grieved and not to worry because he will liberate Arjun from all sins. This is perhaps the only verse in the entire Gita of which you can give a simple and straightforward translation. You will see that when we look at each and every verse, then I'll construct all the words into the sentence, then I have to move the words forwards and backwards. On the other hand, the statement in this verse is just the way it is. The feeling of the heart comes out straightforwardly. You do not have to rearrange the feeling of the heart. It comes out naturally. Shri Krishna tells Arjun to leave all dharmas and come to him alone for shelter. Here the word dharma represents karma, actions that are duties. Here the word dharma does not represent the labels that we've given to religions such as Hindu, Muslim, Christian, etc. It's not all of this. Here dharma means karma, actions that are duties. Srimad Adi Shankaracharya Ji has written in his commentary that when Shri Krishna says here to abandon all dharmas, he means to leave the assurance of all actions, karmas in their totality. One should get rid of the feeling that they have inside them that I should do something, I could do something, and that if I do something then I'll get this, and to leave this egotism inside them. A person says that I did this but this will not work, I'll therefore do something else. I did this and this also does not work and I'll do something else. One should leave this whole jumping around of efforts, and a person wants to attain something through his efforts. If these efforts are desireless, then we bow down to them. But if a person thinks that if I perform this action then I'll attain God, then this is their mistake. God is not attained in exchange for anything. If one attains God, then this is because God wishes to shower His grace on the person. One does not attain God in exchange for something. And wherever there's been a perspective that if you do this and you attain God, then there's a mistake there. From performing those karmas, a preparation begins to accept God, but you cannot say that you'll get God from it. In reality, if you do this much, then you'll be able to receive God. There's no guarantee that God will come. God only comes when He wishes. Nayam atma pravachane nalabhyo na medya na baho na shutena yame vesha bhutena tanusham. One does not attain the soul from discourses, nor does one attain it from being intelligent or from listening. One only attains the soul and God when the soul and the God decide to shower their grace on him. It is not your right, it is His with a capital H. It is only when God gives His grace that we attain God. Having a vision of God or attaining God are not the consequence of the efforts of the individual soul. They are the consequence of the grace of the Supreme Soul. Nobody should consider this to mean that one should not make efforts. It is equally as true a fact that you can only have God's grace showered on you if you do make efforts. But it is not as if you make a certain amount of efforts and you'll get God's grace. This is possible with material things. For example, there's a book. Let's say it has a value of £10. If you give £10 for it, then you'll get the book. But some things are such that if you give not £10, not 100 rupees, not 1,000 rupees, but 1 million, then you still may possibly not get them. And sometimes even if you do not give anything, then you'll get something. This is possible. God's grace is like this. This is the meaning in which God tells Arjun to abandon all dharmas and come to him alone for shelter. Parityaja does not mean to leave, but to surrender them to God. One should surrender all karmas to the Lord. Why would God say to leave karma actions? From the 3rd chapter of the Gita, the Lord has begun saying that one should not leave karma. One cannot possibly let go of actions. Leave aside the thought of leaving actions. Actions do not leave. Nahi kaschit chanam api jatu tishyati akarmakrut. For no one can remain even for a moment without doing work. Therefore, God cannot possibly contradict the subject on which the whole message began. Then anyone who asks that God at the beginning, who described the greatness of karma actions, and the Gita was begun with karma yoga, the yoga of actions, but now you're saying to leave karma actions? Parityaja does not mean to leave. Parityaja means to give up in a nice way. And giving up in a nice way means to surrender them to God. If there is a seed in one's hands, and there are 2 ways in which you can throw it. The first is to throw it at a rock, and the second is to throw it on a farm. If it's thrown as a rock, then you can say that it was thrown, but if it was thrown onto a farm, then you cannot say it was thrown, but that it was grown. Here, when Shri Krishna tells Arjun to abandon all dharmas, this is not the same way as throwing the rock towards a rock, but it's the same as surrendering them to God. All karmas, actions should be surrendered to God. Then Shri Krishna tells Arjun, Mam ekam shararam vraja. Great saints have interpreted this in 2 ways. The first is Ekam Mam Sharanam Vaja, come to me alone for shelter. This is the first interpretation. In this interpretation, the word ekam, alone, is an adjective of mam, me. Therefore, it is said to go to the Supreme Being alone for shelter. But many saints say no, and that ekam alone cannot be an adjective of mam, me. This is because if one says that only mam, me, mam meaning me, then ekam alone is automatically implied from it without it needing to be used. They therefore interpret it as mam ekam sharanam vraja, come to my unique shelter. Here ekam alone, meaning alone, is an adjective for sharanam, shelter, and this interprets Shri Krishna as saying that one should come to his unique shelter and to create a relationship with him. What does it mean to tie a relationship with God? When you tie a relationship with anyone, then there are 6 characteristics of it. Only then is the relationship true. In the same way, if you wish to tie a relationship with the Supreme Soul, then these 6 things should be there. The first thing is that there should be fearlessness. This is a characteristic of a relationship. There should be fearlessness. If there is a true relationship, then there would be no fear. There should be no bodily fear, no mental fear, and not only that, but there should be no fear of offense. This is because many people think that what if he gets offended, and what if this happens to him? If this is the case, then there is something lacking in the relationship. If there is a full and complete relationship, then there will be no fear in it. You should understand them properly, and they should understand you properly. You should have complete Shraddha, faith in them, and they should have complete Shraddha, faith in you. Even perhaps if you do not like it, you know that what he's doing is right. This is because many times it so happens that things take place that we do not like with our minds. We think that why must they have done this? Must this have happened to him? If this happens and one gets fear, then understand that the relationship is loosening. If one wishes to tie a relationship with the Supreme Soul, you have to decide this relationship with a feeling of complete surrender. But the first thing you need is that a fear of God should go away. One should have fearlessness. In the relationship that a child has with his mother, the child experiences so much fearlessness in himself with his mother. Second, there should be no grief. This is the second characteristic of a relationship. If you've tied a relationship with someone, then there should be no grief thereafter. Why does one get grief? The root of grief is in the past. This is the feeling that I had done this before, but I do not have it now, and this results in grief. But if one has tied a relationship with someone, then no grief remains. One should understand that what they have is complete. One should be free from grief. Third, one should be free from worry. No worries will work in a relationship. One should be free from worry. Many times when you look at relationships, they say that we are like this with each other, but they have so many worries of each other. If the husband's about to go to town for 10 days, then the wife becomes worried sick. She asks that, you're going for a business trip, take me with you. And if the husband says, no, I can't take you with me, then she does not get sleep in 10 out of those 10 days. She thinks that, why must he said no? Must there be something there? In a true relationship, there is no worrying. If you have love for somebody, then set him free. If he comes back, then he is yours. And if he does not come back, then he never was. This is a true relationship. If you love somebody, then set them free. Do not make efforts to hold on to them. Make them free. If after you make them free, they come back, then they were always yours. And if they do not come back to you, then they were never yours and you were an illusion. You may have believed that they were yours, but he never was. The test of a relationship does not take place when they're close to each other, but the test of a relationship takes place when they're far away from each other. The Gujarati poet Mariz has said that Bado Adar che ena jati venana jova par milan mati nati marta mohabbat na puravo. It all depends on how they behave after they go. You cannot find a proof of love when someone is sitting with you. This shows the intensity of your relationship. This shows the cleanliness of your relationship. And this shows the purity of your relationship. If someone is sitting next to you, and then they can say, look at me, this is fine. But when they're not in front of you, or not next to you, then despite this, their gaze is looking at you. There should be no worries from both sides in a relationship. This is a very important necessity in a relationship. The fourth thing needed in a relationship is no doubts. If there is a relationship, then no doubt will work. If a person thinks that I do not have much bhakti devotion, but I do so much bhakti devotion, but is God really there or not? Then this person has no relationship with God in reality. If a person thinks that will all my wishes get fulfilled or not, then there is no relationship between this person and God. This is just like making an application and thinking about whether you get the share or not. This is business. One should know that my God watches everything. He knows everything. There should be no doubts in a relationship. The fifth proof of a relationship is that when there is a true relationship, then there is no attitude of testing. This is because there is Shraddha, faith. People say that at least you have to look to see whether it is right. This is a test. Before tying a relationship, you have to do all of this. Before today's weddings, the boy and a girl met 2 times, 4 times, go and see 1 or 2 films, go for dinner, go on a drive, and both of them are talking to each other as if there are tests going on both sides. They're both thinking that, what is this person like? What is this person like? They're both testing each other from both sides. This is a test. Fine, let us say that they like each other and gave each other a pass mark. The engagement takes place and the marriage takes place. Should the attitude of testing still stay? Now it should not stay. And if it still remains, then consider that this relationship is stale. When a true relationship is tied, then no attitude of testing remains. There should be complete trust. One should know what the other person is doing is right. These are feelings. In the same way, when a relationship is tied with the Supreme Soul, then the attitude of testing will not work. A true devotee says that, God, I'm not taking a test of you, and you should also not take a test of me. This may be there on a path of Gran wisdom, where one can say, God, now take my test. When difficulties come into our lives, then we think that God is testing us. But a devotee who has reached the highest level does not even think that his sorrows are a test from God. He thinks that, why would God make a test of me? I am his and he is mine. Where does the test come in this? A true devotee does not even have any attention to this. There should be complete surrender. In Rishikesh, near the flow of the river Ganga, there were 5 to 7 saints having a discussion. It was a warm day. They were sitting at the banks of the river Ganga, and a gust of cool air came from the flow of the Ganga. One saint said, wow, it was very warm. How wonderful is this gust of cool air coming from the flow of the river Ganga? 2 or 3 saints said that, wow, this enhances the greatness of the river Ganga. But the sage who was the most realized soul out of them said, why do you feel this warmth and coolness? If your concentration is constantly on the Supreme Soul, then why does the question of warm and cool come? Why does your attention become distracted on whether warm air comes or whether cool air comes? The very meaning of this is that God has moved away from your mind this much. What kind of one-pointed concentration must they have? How can they have experience of warmth and coolness? In Vrindavan, a great saint saw that some gopis, cowherd girls, were filling water from a well. He went there and there was a disciple with him. The great saint drank some water and told his people that, look at the grace of Brahman, how nice is his water. He said, Brahman, Brahman, 2 or 3 times. One gopi asked another gopi, what is this Brahman, Brahman that the great saint is talking about? The other gopi said that this must be a neighbor of our Lalan, Shri Krishna. How do you recognize anyone apart from our Lalan? Shri Krishna, everything that is Shri Krishna. This is what it is, complete surrender. The 6th proof of a relationship is that there are no contradicting resolves. This is also extremely necessary. There should be no contradicting resolves. One should not think that, why did he do this? Did he do this because he wants to do this towards me? This is not a proof of a relationship. There should be no contradicting resolves, otherwise it is a stale relationship. This is what Shri Krishna is saying here, that you should abandon all of this, including fears, grief, worries, doubts, an attitude of testing and contradicting resolves, and come to him alone for shelter. And if you go to him alone for shelter, then be not grieved, because he will release you from all sins. We have to be unitary and go to the shelter of the One with a capital O. Srimad Adi Shankaracharya says for this that you have to go to such a Lord. Nagno ni sangha shuddha. You have to leave everything and seek the shelter of God. Many people think that in this verse, Shri Krishna is being very egotistic and is saying that you should leave everything and go to him. If you look at it in reality, then this is not egotism, but God making Arjun ready for complete surrender. While the feeling of me is there, there's a difference. There is a material world, there is pain, and there is despondency. But if you want to leave all of this, then there's one solution, and that is to seek the shelter of the Supreme Being alone. When the feeling of me goes, then everything goes away. This is true liberation. Shri Krishna is absolutely beyond egotism, and he can clearly say to Arjun to come to him alone for shelter. A person who is truly egotistic cannot say this. That is why you see in the material world that if a person is really egotistic, then he makes a very big show of humility. If there's an extremely wealthy person and you've gone to see his factory, it's a very big factory. You're sitting upstairs in an air-conditioned office and you see the whole factory from the window in the office. The machines are working, making a lot of sounds, and you say that you have such a big factory. God has given you so much grace. You are so wealthy and you must be so intelligent that you're able to collect all of this wealth and that you're able to manage all of this. Now, if the factory owner is egotistic, then he'll say, no, what can I do? I've not done anything. the more such stories he makes, then this means he's that much more egotistic. In his mind, he is thinking, keep talking about me more. But the person who is straightforward will say, yes, I have had to work hard, but it's ultimately God's grace. See, he is a simple man. He agrees that he has worked hard. But the more egotistic that a person is, then the more that he's liking what you're saying, then the more he'll make efforts to bow down. Namam namam me fair hai, both name nadan. There's a difference in bowing down. A lot of ignorant people bow down. The more egotistical the person is, then the more he will bow down through his words. He bows down in pomposity and he bows down in hypocrisy. And if it is a straightforward person, then he clearly writes that this has happened with me, this has happened, and that has happened. Do not consider it to be a good as soon as the word I or me comes. You have to look at the feeling behind them saying I or me. What are the feelings in the heart? What does he want to convey by that I? This is what is important. When Guruji goes to families where they speak Hindi in particular, the hermitages of saints, for example, in Hardwar or Rishikesh, he has had the opportunity to go and meet the saints and has conversations in person with some of them. He looks at their language. When he asks Swamiji, how many rooms are there in your hermitage? Then some of them say, how is it any of ours? There are 150 rooms in this hermitage. When we sit down to eat, then they say that you're eating these vegetables, but have they come down to eat? Then, but have they come to your hand? That's 800-acre land near Delhi. We have nothing, brother. But he says, is it yours? Is the 800-acre land yours? Are the vegetables that you have eaten come from your land? We should understand that when they say your, then this is not ours, but theirs. They talk a lot. Now, he has used the word your, but why has he described this? If in reality it was ours, then would we not know? And when we sit down to eat chapatis, then what have we got to do with where the wheat comes from? And when we sit down to eat vegetables, then what we've got to do with where the vegetables come from? But he wants to describe that all of this is his and that he's collected all of this. He wants to imply that I've collected all of this. I've so many such material people. They say that, do you have a small bungalow? Do you have a small factory? If it is ours, then give us the keys. Therefore he's saying yours, but he's really talking about mine. This is a shady person. No matter if he's not saying me and he's not using the word I, but his egotism keeps showing under his speech with each and every word. On the other hand, the straightforward person said, I did this, I did that. This is straightforward. What I mean to say is that in this verse, it's not Sri Krishna's egotism, but it's Sri Krishna's naturalness, straightforwardness, and an outpouring of the reality. The Lord is saying what is the reality. From this, I will also tell you that there's a difference between the rules of the material world and the rules of the Lord. The rules of the material world are such that the person who considers himself to be special because of material objects, these very same material objects make the person without those objects deprived of objects and inferior. This is the rule of the material world. The thing because of which you're holding your head high in the material world, the same thing will make your head look down. You may think that I'm sitting on the seat of power, I've become a minister, and that is why I'm good. Is that so? After 6 months, 1 year or 2 years, when that seat goes, then this head looks around low. It is a rule of the material world that the thing because of which he has raised his head, that very same thing made him put his head down. One considers themselves to be special because of certain objects in the material world, but because of the very same objects, a person becomes inferior inside. A person has gained fame and reputation in society and thinks that, wow, so many people are praising me, I'm very good. The same people that are bringing him garlands of flowers today, one cannot tell if the very same people will come back with garlands of roses. One can become inferior because of them. And if not today, then tomorrow, the material world would do this. On the other hand, the rule of the Lord is that if through bhakti devotion, one brings his antakaran inner being in close proximity with the Lord, and absolute does not consider themselves to be more special than the Lord, or does not have egotism of anything, then the more straightforwardness and transparency with which the person goes in close proximity with the Lord, then the more that the divinity of the Supreme Soul enters into that person. This is the rule of the Lord. This is the divinity of God. It is to the extent that when one goes in close proximity with the Lord, then the touch of divinity can be experienced in the person's body, mind, speech and intellect, which are all mortal instruments. This only happens when one has close proximity with the Lord, then they have no egotisms of themselves being special. When one knows little, then his egotism is like an elephant. Bhartrhari says that Yada kinchit granam dvipa idam dhamam dasa bhava Yada kinchit buddhana jana sakasha devadanta bujajana sakasa dvagata taga mukharasmi dvar imam mada meva pagata. When I knew very little, then I thought that there's nobody like me, and a person blind due to his ego, which is like an elephant. But slowly and slowly I became acquainted with knowledgeable and wise people and learnt a lot from them. As I spent time with these knowledgeable people, then I realized that I was very dumb, and just like sweating gets rid of one's fever, the presence of knowledgeable people got rid of my egotism. When you come into close proximity with the Supreme Soul in this state, then the divinity of the Supreme Soul enters into you and can be seen in your body, mind, speech and intellect. And you can feel that divinity. You can see it. It is a simple and straightforward rule of science that if something is full, then you cannot put anything into it, but if something is empty, then you can put something into it. If a person is sitting with the rocks of egotism, then how can you put anything into it, because he is filled from the beginning? The egotistic person thinks that I am full and I know everything, I am very clever, and therefore nothing can be filled in him. But a person who is empty can be filled with something and can gain something. When God says here that come to me alone for shelter, then in reality this is a matter of becoming empty. Then God tells Arjun to not be grieved. See that God has taken Arjun to the same place as he took Arjun when God began saying his message of the Gita in the 11th verse of the 2nd chapter that began with Sri Bhagavan Uvacha. The blessed Lord said, Asochan anvaschostvam pragna vadam chabasase. You grieve for those who you should not grieve for, and yet you speak words about wisdom. The first word used in this verse is asochan, which comes from the root sucha, meaning to worry. God says the same thing here, that ma sucha, be not grieved. He tells Arjun not to worry. In the next verse, God gets a little strict. Idam te na